Sister tried to steal my boyfriend and hit me 6 years ago. We hadn't spoken since, but at my bridal shower party, my parents invited my estranged sister and tried to force us to make up. I finally got my revenge. Asterisk, asterisk. I'm a 28-year-old female who hasn't been on speaking terms with my sister, 26, for almost 6 years now after one really terrible incident that I will get to in a while. My sister and I always had intense sibling rivalry growing up, and for some reason my parents never did anything to discourage it. They would actually encourage us to compete more, which I think was a poor decision because it fueled our jealousy. If they had nipped it in the bud, maybe things would have been better between us when we were kids, or at least we could have put our differences aside for some time. As we grew up, our resentment for each other intensified. By high school, we barely spoke, and that was how we liked it. When I moved out for college, I only saw my sister when I came back home, which was slightly better than having someone hostile around all the time. Around the time I was supposed to be graduating, I started dating my fiancé. We had been friends for 3 years in college, and before we graduated, he finally worked up the nerve to ask me out. I said yes because I really liked him too. After we graduated, we moved into an apartment together because we had already been friends for 3 years and didn't think it was a big deal. Once we had been together for 3 months, I decided to introduce him to my parents and took him home for dinner one weekend. Coincidentally, my sister had also decided to come back home for the weekend to start college. This was a recipe for disaster. My life was going pretty great at that point. I had started working, had my own apartment, and had a loving boyfriend. Unfortunately, my sister wasn't doing well. She hadn't been able to get into her first choice of college and had to settle for her second, making her pretty unhappy. I later learned from my parents that she was struggling to make friends in college, which is why she was coming back home every weekend so frequently. When I introduced my boyfriend to my parents, I could see that my sister was not happy about it at all. She sulked in the background. My boyfriend knew about our strained relationship, but with great difficulty, I managed to introduce her to him as my sister. When I did, a magical change seemed to come over her, and she turned on her charm. I tried not to be bothered by it, but it was really weird. After that, she became a different person altogether. While we were sitting around chatting, she kept trying to talk to my boyfriend and expressed a lot of interest in his life. Both he and I were a bit creeped out by her behavior, but said nothing. During dinner, she started crossing the line by flirting with him right in front of me. She wasn't even being subtle. It was very obvious, and I could tell she was just doing this to piss me off. I tried to ignore it for a few seconds because I didn't want my boyfriend to see how dysfunctional our family was, but I couldn't control my temper. At one point, I snapped and told my sister to cut it out because he was my boyfriend, and it was gross that she was throwing herself at him like this. She rolled her eyes at me and went back to trying to talk to him. I started yelling at her, telling her that he was a guest and, more importantly, my guest, so she needed to be more respectful because she was creeping him out. I remember she told me that she could tell my boyfriend deserved better and that she was just helping him out by letting him know there were other options besides me. The way she said it really ticked me off, and I started cursing at her. She cursed back. I guess I called her a loser at one point and said she was only bitter because I wasn't doing as badly as her, which really got under her skin. At that point, she grabbed my hair across the table, dragged me to her side, and slapped me senseless. I couldn't even stop it because I was so shocked that she had physically attacked me. Usually, we had tried to keep our hands to ourselves after middle school, but after she attacked me, it turned into a full-blown brawl. Our parents and my boyfriend had to drag us apart because we were both vicious. By the end of it, we were both really injured and scratched up, but still yelling at each other. My boyfriend was the one to drag me away, come get me inside the car, and drive us back home while trying to calm me down the whole way. I was really worked up, so I was glad to have him by my side because otherwise, that fight might have gone on much longer. This was the incident after which I stopped speaking to my sister entirely. We had fought before, but none as nasty as that, and it was pretty much the last straw for me. I was already living away from her, so I didn't feel obliged to consider her a part of my family anymore. The day after that incident, my parents called to let me know they had told my sister off. Even though she wasn't ready to apologize yet, they hoped we would sort things out at some point. I told them I wasn't interested in making amends with her because I wanted things to remain bad between us. They tried to change my mind, but I told them that part of the problem was their own doing. From our childhood, they had never acknowledged the crazy sibling rivalry we had and had actually encouraged it, so they had no right to be surprised that we didn't want each other in our lives. They didn't agree with me that day, and we ended up arguing, but a couple of days later, they called again to say they realized their mistake and wanted to apologize. It felt a bit pointless at that stage, but I still forgave them because I wasn't going to speak to my sister anymore. I didn't want to lose my relationship with my parents either. 6 years have passed since that incident, and I haven't had any contact with my sister. I know my parents have been in touch with her and have a fairly normal relationship, which I don't really care about as long as they aren't forcing me to fix my relationship with her. I'm okay with that. I've seen her at other family events, but we never speak. Even when we meet over the holidays, we tend to avoid each other, and that's how I like it. Everyone in the family knows we don't have a good relationship, but nobody knows why. They just know we had a fight. They don't know the specific details, and I intended to keep it that way because neither of us came out looking good in that incident. For almost 6 years, I hadn't spoken to my family about this, but recently the truth came out at my bridal shower. My maid of honor had only invited a couple of close family members and, of course, my bridesmaids. My fiancé was also there. Since we weren't going the traditional route and only inviting female members, I wanted all my favorite people there. But for some reason, my parents decided to go out of their way to invite my estranged sister to the event as well. I genuinely don't know what they were thinking, but when they walked in with my sister beside them, I was really shocked for a couple of seconds. To my surprise, my sister looked equally shocked to see me there as well. Everyone else in the room fell silent when they walked in, and it felt like a standoff. After what seemed like an eternity, my parents finally walked up to me and addressed both my sister and me. They said that 6 years had passed since that incident and that a lot had changed since then. The most important change was that we were both much older and more mature, so they expected us to handle the situation maturely and make amends with each other. By the look on her face, it was clear my parents had lied to my sister to bring her here. Before she could say anything, I told my parents they had no right to do this on a day that was important to me and politely asked them to leave along with my sister. I was trying to behave dignifiedly because I didn't want to ruin the event, but my parents did not leave. They told me to let the past go, which really rubbed me the wrong way because they were making it sound like nothing important had happened and that it would be easy for me to just let it go. To refresh their memory and let everyone else know what exactly had happened 6 years ago, I repeated the entire incident and then asked the room if they thought this was something I could just let go of. It would have been a different story if I was marrying somebody else, but I was marrying the same guy whom my sister had tried hitting on when I first introduced him to my family. She had done it shamelessly right in front of me and treated him like part of a competition he never agreed to be in. Most importantly, she was the one who had attacked me first because I had called her out on her behavior and said she was a loser. It had been pretty traumatizing for me because before that, no one had ever tried to beat me up like that. Even after that, she never once apologized and pretended like nothing had happened, so I didn't find it necessary to forgive her and let the past go. I thought it was more important to hold on to the past, so I never let someone like her back into my life. It was ridiculous for my parents to think they could just show up with her at my bridal shower and expect both of us to go along with it. My parents were about to argue some more with me, but thankfully my sister came to her senses and walked out. I guess she wasn't happy about being lied to either. My mother went after her, probably to pacify her, while my father stayed back with me for a couple of seconds. I told him I didn't want to speak to him right now because he had really let me down. He looked pissed off and said I was being unreasonable, claiming that if something happened 6 years ago, it doesn't make sense to keep holding on to it and act like a brat over it. Personally, I don't think I was acting like a brat, but at that point, I had no interest in arguing with my father or trying to prove myself right, so I told him to leave. After a couple of minutes, he left as well. I had to excuse myself for a few minutes afterward to compose myself because I was kind of overwhelmed, but thankfully, my fiancé and my maid of honor were right there for me. I was back to normal within a few minutes, and we resumed the event as if nothing had happened. Everyone else played along since they could understand that I didn't want to think about my parents or my sister and needed something to distract myself. Once the event was done, I went back home with my fiancé and we didn't speak about that incident afterward. This had happened about 5 days ago, and I hadn't heard from my parents since then. I was fine with it because after what they had done, I thought it was better for us to have some time apart. I didn't even think they were going to contact me by themselves anytime soon, but unfortunately, they did. Not to apologize, but to blame me for the situation my sister is in right now. This morning, I received a phone call from my mother. As soon as I answered, she told me that I absolutely had to speak to my aunt and ensure that she gave the position she had been talking about to my sister and nobody else. She sounded hysterical and very panicked, and I had no idea what she was even talking about, so I had to ask her to back up. She explained that my sister had been unemployed for about 6 months since her previous company had laid off many employees due to downsizing. A couple of weeks ago, She realized she didn't have enough money to cover rent anymore, so she had to move back in with our parents and was looking for a job but couldn't find anything she liked or that paid well enough. My mother had spoken to my aunt about this, and since my aunt was starting a new business, she had decided to hire my sister as the head of marketing, given her previous experience in that department. However, after the incident at my bridal shower where I narrated what had happened 6 years ago, my aunt stopped responding to them and eventually rescinded the offer. This wasn't surprising because I had always been my aunt's favorite. When my mother forwarded me the message my aunt had sent her, I thought it was a reasonable excuse. My aunt had said that from what she had gathered from the incident I narrated at the party, it was obvious that my sister had serious anger issues. The fact that she hadn't apologized, not even at the bridal shower, didn't sit right with my aunt. Her behavior was all off. There was a more qualified candidate for the position whom she had interviewed a few weeks back, but she had initially decided to give the job to my sister because she was family. However, she had changed her mind and decided the job would go to the more qualified candidate. I thought this was completely fair and was actually pretty glad my aunt had changed her mind because otherwise, my sister would have been nepotistically hired. As someone who has faced the consequences of nepotism in the workplace, I didn't want my aunt to be part of the problem. When I read that message, I told my mother that I didn't think I could do anything about it because it seemed my aunt had found someone who was actually fit for the job. More importantly, that was the reason my sister wasn't being hired. I told her that I wouldn't be speaking to my aunt because this was her professional life, and I didn't want to overstep my boundaries. But my mother started losing her mind and began yelling at me, accusing me of sabotaging my sister on purpose by ruining her reputation and image in front of our family. She told me that on the day of my bridal shower, I had no need to talk about the incident that had taken place 6 years ago. Since I hadn't spoken about it for so long, I could have kept it a secret, but she said I actively wanted to portray my sister as unstable and evil by narrating that incident to seek sympathy from the rest of the family and make myself look like the good guy. Even though it was me who had instigated that fight by calling my sister a loser, especially when I knew it would hit her where it hurts. For the record, while narrating the incident, I mentioned that I was the one who called her a loser after which she attacked me, so I wasn't hiding anything. But even then, I don't think calling her names justified how she got physical. For my mother to claim that I talked about that incident on purpose to ruin her image was simply unfair. So, I hung up and blocked my parents. However, I've been thinking about it and feel like I need to know for sure that talking about that incident was not a bad move. During the phone call, my mother claimed that my sister was a changed person now, but I hadn't even given her a chance, which was really nasty of me. Update 1 *. Hello Reddit. Before I get into what happened after I made my original post, I just want to thank everyone who took time out of their day to comment on my post. Thank you for all the advice and kind comments, it really means a lot to me. Now, coming to what happened after I blocked my parents. My sister has obviously been blocked for the past 6 years, so she couldn't contact me, and now neither could my parents. With no other way left to contact me, they decided to visit me. I'm getting married in a couple of weeks, so I really don't have time to deal with all of this. I have a lot on my plate as it is. When they showed up, I told them to leave because I had just come back home from work, and my fiancé and I had to head out immediately afterward to meet with my designer for a last-minute fitting of my wedding dress. They had just shown up at the wrong time, and we were about to leave, but we couldn't get out of the house as long as they were standing outside the door because I knew they would find a way to keep me talking to them and annoy me. I even threatened to call the cops on them, but that didn't get them to leave either. Honestly, I didn't want to call the cops because I felt it would be too much, and I didn't want to be one of those people who calls the cops for every little thing. After speaking to my fiancé, we quickly decided to let them in, talk to them, and then be on our way. Once we decided that, we opened the door, invited them in, and told them to make it quick because we had places to be. Thankfully, my parents came straight to the point. They told me that because of what I had done at my brother's shower, my aunt had rescinded her offer to hire my sister. Since this was technically my fault, I had to speak to her and make sure she got a job one way or another. It was the same argument again, and I didn't want to keep talking in circles. So I told them that I had already discussed this with my mother on the phone and told her that I couldn't do anything about it. Showing up at my house to talk about it once more seemed pointless, especially since I was getting married in a couple of weeks and they knew I was really busy. Then my sister interrupted and said that talking about the job offer was not the only purpose of the visit. This surprised me because that was the first time we had actually spoken to each other in 6 years. She continued speaking and told me that the real reason they were here was because she felt she really owed me an apology. I honestly don't even know what to tell you guys because I'm still not sure how I felt at that moment. I was very doubtful of her intentions because I obviously don't trust her, so I decided to be very straightforward and asked her if she was only here to apologize because she thought I could help her get the job or if she genuinely wanted to apologize to me. If she was only here to apologize because she thought I could get her the job, there was no need for her to waste her breath because it wouldn't be possible for me. She was a bit surprised by how cutthroat I was, but managed to tell me that it was only our parents over here talking about the job. However, she had actually come all the way here to apologize. When I looked at my parents, even they seemed surprised, so this was clearly not something they had discussed. But my sister didn't seem to care about it. She told me she didn't even care about the job and was only here to tell me that she had thought about her behavior towards me for a really long time over these past 6 years. She always found excuses not to apologize to me, but after the bridal shower, she could no longer run away from the truth that she had treated me really badly. I could tell by her behavior and tone that she was serious, and both my fiancé and I are still struggling to process it. She told me that right from her childhood, she felt like she had to meet everything, which made her very resentful of me. She realized she had spent her entire childhood and teenage years competing with me for absolutely no reason because, in the real world, it didn't even matter and nobody seemed to care. She regretted all of it because she could have just as easily been friends with me since I had tried to be her friend several times, but she had been the one to rebuff me because she always saw me as competition. It was insane to hear her say all of that because that's exactly how I had felt. I started tearing up when she was sharing that experience. She then addressed my fiancé and told him that she was also really apologetic for how she had behaved with him the first and last time they interacted. She got so caught up in trying to beat me that she didn't even realize what kind of disgusting person she had become. This apology was long overdue. After she was done talking, she didn't even wait for us to say anything and just said that it wasn't necessary for us to forgive her. She just wanted to get it out of her system, and now that she was going to let us be on our way. She walked out, and it was just me, my fiancé, and my parents in the room, all in absolute shock, trying to make sense of what had just happened because we hadn't seen any of this coming. After a while, even my parents left without a word, and my fiancé and I headed out a couple of minutes later for the fitting. We didn't discuss any of this until we came back home, and only about half an hour ago did we finally start talking about my sister and what she had said. I thought it was incredibly mature of her to finally apologize, even though it had taken her 6 years to do so. Judging by her behavior, she meant every word of it. Now, we're trying to figure out whether to forgive her or not. It's too soon to tell because we haven't even started processing all of this yet. My fiancé and I are inclined to contact her later and tell her that we forgive her. I have already unblocked her. I just need some more time to tell her that it's fine. But one thing I'm really glad about is that even though it took her many years, at least she was able to realize that we could have been friends someday. I was tearing up as she shared her experience because it mirrored exactly how I had felt. Update 2 asterisk. Hey, I just realized that I hadn't mentioned what I was planning to do regarding the situation with my parents in my last update. To be honest, I was so caught up with the situation with my sister that it completely slipped my mind. It's been a couple of days since we last met them, and they haven't bothered to reach out to us since then. I don't think they're sorry about anything, so we're going to continue not speaking to them. Honestly, I blame my parents for a lot of things, including how the situation turned out between my sister and me. They had the chance to be better parents, but they completely screwed it up. I had tried really hard to keep them around as part of my life, but they've always made it quite impossible. In the past 6 years, we've had many fights and arguments, and I always tried to forgive them. But now, I can't do that anymore. I can't keep making excuses for people who clearly don't care about my feelings or even my sister's. If I'm being honest, the bottom line is that we are not going to speak to them, and I don't think they're going to attend my wedding anyway. But just to be on the safe side, my fiancé and I are going to reach out to them in a couple of days and tell them that they are no longer welcome there. So that's that about them. Update 3 asterisk. Hey guys. I got married last week. I had a wonderful time, and everything was really beautiful and dreamy, exactly the way I had imagined it to be. My parents, just as I had expected, did not attend my wedding. I didn't even need to reach out to them. They sent me an email saying they wouldn't be attending because there had clearly been some sort of terrible misunderstanding. Because of that, both my sister and I have started villainizing them, and they don't need to be told that we hold them responsible for the kind of relationship we had, even though they had tried their best to be good parents to us. Now, they plan on taking some time away from us and living their separate lives without bothering to constantly think about their daughters. We don't appreciate their presence in our lives. I'm fine with that if that's what they want. On a happier note, I did reach out to my sister a couple of days after I posted my last update. I told her that I accepted her apology and would love for her to be present at my wedding. She graciously accepted my invitation and showed up at the wedding. It was just a really happy day. It's crazy to think that a couple of months ago, if somebody had told me that my parents would not be present at my wedding but my sister would, I would have laughed in their faces. But here we are now. I'm just happy that everything went smoothly, and I'm finally rebuilding my relationship with my sister. Maybe someday my parents will come to their senses and apologize to us, but for now, this is enough for me. My husband and I are going to be leaving for our honeymoon pretty soon, and life has never been better.